Disney Lorcana Challenge in Toronto was a huge success. 970-ish players came to, battle it out for the final winnings, and Amber Emerald took that tournament down, but we are kind of past that now. 4.5 is in the past. We're here at Shimmering Skies, and I have a lot of information from the side events of that tournament. I was actually able to get my hands on all of the decks registered in sets 8 and 9 a.m. tournaments on Sunday, and we have a look at the top 8 breakdown for Saturday. So lots to cover in this video. Let's get right into it. I'm going to talk about the decks from the Saturday event first, and then break down the additional tournaments later on in the video. So if you're looking for all that stuff, you can check the timestamps below. Here we are. Let's get into some Ruby Sapphire. Ruby Sapphire took first place in the Saturday competitive tournament. This was a 62-player tournament where this deck was able to take down the most points in the event. Ruby Sapphire is a deck that has been very successful in the set 4 metagame. It's been even more successful in the early weeks of set 5 because of the addition of Cusco. Cusco, Vision of the Future, Hideaway are all great new cards added to this, along with Tipo. Tipo was a card that we were comparing in a spot that we thought Chicha was going to be in. Chicha has proven to not be worth the slot for Ruby Sapphire decks. It may still be playable in Sapphire Steel. Time will tell if that ends up being true. But for now, we're looking at what this card can do for this particular deck list. The idea that on 2, you have an inkable character that can increase your odds of going to a turn 4, or even more importantly, set up very interesting plays such as a turn 3 Tipo into a turn 4 Fishbone Quill, play another card, face down Exert It, and then play a card like Vision of the Future. And really, you are taking some turns off here by doing these things and not really adding to the board very much. But when you have cards like Be Prepared and Sisu in your deck to kind of just remove everything your opponent is doing very early, it's not that difficult to get away with these play lines on the play to just follow up with saying, okay, I'm glad you gained your 10 lore. You're probably not going to gain any more for the rest of the game. The other additional line here, of course, is Tipo on 2 into a Grammatala on 3. We could also have a Popsicle on 1, Tipo on 2, and then Hyrim on 3, which is just another way to draw cards and kind of refill your hand and set yourself up for the end game. Sisu 3 is a very odd spot for the deck, but the human Sisu is very important to the current metagame because it allows you to interact with Daisy probably better than any other card in the game. It's much better than Brawl because Brawl, yes, is inkable, but you don't put anything in play. Having the ability to put Sisu in play and still be a 1/1 lore gaining threat to just pick you up some cheeky lore, or just utilize with a card like Ice Block to maybe even take out some characters along the way, it all kind of does add up. And in the end, it's still a body that can gain you lore throughout the game, even if it is just a couple cheeky 3 to 5 lore or something like that. Hideaway and Cusco added the bonus of having ways to remove locations, which I think is very important for this deck. As you can see, we are removing ourselves from Hercules and other things we had seen in the past. There is no Vitalis Spheres in this list, which are more common in the item versions of this, and this is more of the ramp, beefy versions, winning with Sisu, Maleficent, and Tamatoa, not being hyper-focused on putting 9 or 10 items in play, but I still think the card like Vitalis Spear will probably find a home in these decks regardless. The card just seems too good to not use, even in a world where we're giving a Medusa Rush or a Cusco Rush or even Sisu or Tamatoa. All of those cards really can gain a true benefit from having the additional ability of Rush and just another threat to the game. Huge shout out to Andrew here for picking up a first place finish in the Saturday competitive constructed side event at DLC Toronto. Matthew Lopez also took a top 8 finals position with Emerald Steel. And this deck has some truly interesting choices. Cheshire Cat is not a card that we have seen much of all since being released in the Rise of the Floodborn, but we also have Chief Bogo. Is the most crazy thing to me about this deck is that we have a lack of Morph. Where is Morph in this deck list? I think Morph would be insane. I don't think we need the Cheshire Cat on 3 at all. I would remove those cards immediately from this deck and just play Morph. From that point forward, you could have turn 3 Jafar, Pegasus, Beast, even Robin Hood, which is crazy. And then on turn 4, we can have Tinkerbell or Zimba have an ability to shift on with Cheshire Cat later. It also adds more layers to shift on with Diablo. That is definitely a card that I would add to this list. I've removed Cheshire Cat 100%. I mean, the 3-drop 0/3 2 lore. This card is not a card that anybody wants to be playing in Disney Lorcana. I would get rid of it immediately, just play Morph instead, and just have this idea that every single card in your deck can shift, which is insane. Chief Bogo, very interesting. I'm very curious if instead of playing Cheshire Cat, if playing the Floodborn Prince Philip would just be better rather than having this like exert banish guys thing. We could just play our prince and then like we can put everything in the bag correctly to where it would deal 1 damage to the board. And then Chief Bogo with the prince would end up literally just be prepared or grab your swords effectively against your opponent board. But instead of just doing 2 damage, you're actually just removing every character they have in play. Might be a nice little thing to try out as well. But this deck, at the end of the day, super fun looking, really, really techy and versatile. I would love to know how many times we put the Floodborn Cheshire Cat into play and just your opponent goes, what does that card do again? I need to read it. Understanding we need babooms in certain matchups, I think it's really important. You have to find a way to get rid of opposing Diablos quickly and effectively. And of course, shifting in Grab Your Swords is nice. We have a lot of options for that, which is another way that Morph could kind of increase the ability to do multiple damage in a turn and really make everything effective. Chief Bogo plus Grab Your Swords is 3 damage to the board. Chief Bogo plus Grab Your Swords plus Tinkerbell is 4 damage to the board. I mean, it's virtually removing everything from the game. Because of that and those lines I just stated, I would probably just not play the big Cheshire Cats or probably not play the big Prince Philip and just fill in with more Tinkerbells and things like that. I think it's probably just a more versatile and better card in general. All in all, I love this deck. I think it's very interesting. It's very different. It's trying out some new cards, which I think is cool. It's definitely one of those where I would sleeve this up. I would give it a shot as is. But at first glance, I was truly shocked that Morph wasn't in it. All in all, congratulations to Matt Lopez on a top 8 finish. More Diablo decks is exactly what everyone wants to see, right? Emerald Amethyst tempo, but I would probably consider this going all the way to cards like Ursula and being a 7-cost 4/7 with 3 lore that's preventing our opponent from singing songs is pretty great. Really leaning into Ursula Deceiver of All is something I love about this deck. Having the 4 friends on the other side, the Mother's Knows Best, as really just a way to double down on how powerful Ursula is and understanding that in this deck we have Diablo, Prince John, and Ursula Deceiver of all at 4 ofs. That is 12 3-drops that when they come into play, they completely alter the game when unanswered. So you are really demanding of your opponent saying you need to have answers to these cards or I'm just going to like completely take you out of this game. Lyle is a card that we've seen come up. It was a card that was in top 8 decks of the Disney Lorcana Challenge. When he comes into play, he gives something reckless, which is pretty great. He also has the ability to remove lore from your opponent. So he's definitely attacking the game as a really nice card to play on the draw. I think his stat line is also just fine. If they're utilizing a card like Brawl, that's completely cool because they're getting rid of your Lyle and not your Diablo or not your Ursula. So this is all great as well. Cricky, phenomenal addition to this deck. It's a way to remove locations. It's a way to kind of like answer the board. It's also really a way to utilize cards like Curse Merfolk and Ursula Deceiver, and even Lyle in itself, to be honest, as a way to take their low strength and make your opponent feeling so comfortable saying, oh, there's no way they can trade in my board. My characters are good. We don't need to worry about it. All of a sudden, when you play a Cricky, you can actually just completely eviscerate your opponent's board and still might have things laying around because of the higher willpower stats on these characters. So I think Cricky is a great addition, and 3 lore on a 5-cost inkable with this ability is just outstanding. You're Welcome is the newest card in this deck. I believe it's also the only set 5 card in it. And that's just another card that is really good. It's very powerful. It gives you the ability to throw away a card when necessary. You know, Ursula 2 is a great card to remove songs from opponent's hands, but after that, it doesn't really do a whole bunch. So later in the game, if you just want to You're Welcome your own Ursula, you're not really losing too much there. It's not a huge tempo loss whatsoever to make those plays. And of course, sometimes you get boggled up with discard cards in your hand. You can actually You're Welcome your opponent's character, and then they can draw cards, and then you can utilize a card like Sudden Chill or Hypnotize with Prince John, remove the cards they draw anyway, and then you draw the cards on top of that. So you can remove a threat and then kind of remove the benefit of your welcome, giving your opponent 2 cards if you're also at Prince John, Sudden Chill, or Hypnotize. All in all, I do think that this deck has a true potential in the set 5 metagame. I think we saw glimpses of this being successful. There were 2 of these decks in top 8 of the DLC this past weekend. It's definitely a deck that had kind of a breakout tournament. And in a given metagame, we could see this deck truly take it over and be a force to be reckoned with. Congratulations again to Chris Larrabee on your finish in the top 8 competitive constructed side event on Saturday. Okay, so that was the Saturday top 8, kind of the different decks that were successful there. But now I really want to show you guys this sweet information. I was able to get access to the total deck list registered for the event on Saturday, the 8 a.m. and the Sunday, 9 a.m. So we can kind of look at that complete meta breakdown together. Let's get into it. So the Sunday, 8 a.m., I believe at 170 registered players in the tournament, and you're looking at the overall meta breakdown. It is very obvious here to see that Amber Steel claimed 45 slots in the 170 players registered, and it was towering over everything else, the complete skyscraper to the view here that we're looking at. While Amber Steel came in at 45, Amethyst Ruby came in with 20, Amber Amethyst was 18, Ruby Sapphire at 14, Amber Ruby at 12, Amethyst Emerald at 11, Amethyst Sapphire at 11, Amethyst Steel at 8, Emerald Steel at 8, Sapphire Steel at 8, Amber Emerald at 7, Emerald Ruby at 3, Emerald Sapphire at 3, Amber Sapphire at 1, and Ruby Steel at 1. 15 different ink combinations. I mean, that is just remarkable. If we're being completely honest, the idea that in this tournament there were 15 different registered decks is insane. That is something to be very excited about for the metagame. I know players really enjoyed the Into the Inklands metagame, very similar to the 4.5 metagame. There were 9 different decks in the top 64 of the DLC in Toronto. Something looking like this and saying, hey, 15 different decks registered for a 170 player tournament, even if it's just a couple one-offs, that's fine. Even the lower numbers here of like Emerald Ruby, Amber Emerald, and things like that, they were still successful in these tournaments and hitting in the top 16 of this event. So when you look at that and you say, oh, limited number added, that's okay because they're still successful, which means there is a lot to be learned about this meta. But let's take a look here at some of the decks that were successful in this particular event. So the winner of the event was played by young Gavin here. He was the undefeated in the tournament. He went 6-0-2 with this Sapphire Amethyst deck. And a huge shout out to Gavin. I mean, this is an incredible feat for a kid of his age. You love to see it. The idea here that we are playing so many new cards as well. Mufasa, Cusco, Madam Mim Elephant, Cogsworth, the Library. This very much is a Shimmering Skies deck. I even forgot Tipo over here. Just so much going on, so much fun. Really, I forgot Elsa as well, I think. There's so many new cards. This deck really cannot exist without Shimmering Skies, and it is leaning in to playing all these cards. I also need to put a small shout out to Belle. The Floodborn Belle is another great addition to this deck. You have so many characters that have huge willpower that when sticking around, they have damage left over. Having a character like Belle come in on 5, being a 4/4 body herself with 2 lore is respectable enough. But the idea that you can move damage from one of your characters to your opponent is great. It also gives you the ability to move damage around from opponent character. We actually had a game on stream yesterday where my opponent played Belle, and that damage moved from one of my characters to another character and banished it. So that's a nice little tech card that you can look at for as well. Yzma making another appearance here. There's just a lot going on, and I think this is going to be a deck that will be very explored between now and the Vegas or even the CCS 10K this weekend, that maybe we'll see some success from Sapphire Amethyst as well. All in all, I love this deck. I love that it's representing a new ink combination that could be a threat to the Disney Lorcana metagame in Shimmering Skies. One more time, huge shout out to Gavin. Just remarkable day for a kid of his age. Absolutely phenomenal. Red Fossa also claimed 3rd place in the 8 a.m. Sunday constructed side event. I will say from the door here, I'm like 100% positive that that Daisy Duck is the wrong Daisy Duck, and we know it should be Donald State. I think it's a little mistake, guys. It's okay. We have to believe that we're questing for 2 with a 1/4. That's all I'm saying. So Daisy Duck, obviously the new staple of this. The other card here is Invited to the Ball. These are the only 2 new cards from Shimmering Skies, but we're very much just saying, hey, we have Pluto, we have Doc, we have Gaston. We actually did play some games with this deck on stream yesterday. There will be a video on the TFM gameplay channel. So if you're looking to see this deck in action, we do actually have some stream games with it. And the video should be up on the channel in the coming days. So this is a deck that we did play test ourselves. We did like some of the things going on. We understood it. I believe Dick played a turn 4 Carefree Surfer Stitch against me, which is like insane that happened, but it did. And there was a 4/8 in play, and it was a bit scary for me, but I think we managed to get through, truthfully. All in all, I think this deck is great. I think it's very well positioned right now. I do think that this deck will be molded and modified a ton. I think this deck really needs to figure out how it's winning on the draw as opposed to being on the play. I'm not positive that the Pluto Doc Gaston line is good enough to win on the draw. So you might need to be looking for other ways to kind of compete with your opponent when going second. And that's a lot of things that I think most of these decks right now are designed to play solitaire and really go ball to the wall early on. Any deck with Daisy Duck and Piglet is just saying, like, I'm going to win every game on the play, most likely. And you probably just aren't going to like be able to stop me. We need to figure out ways to mold these decks to win on the draw. Huge shout out to Jeremy again for picking up 3rd place finish in the 8 a.m. Sunday Constructed Side event. What everyone kind of thought was going to be the boogeyman of the metagame, Amber Amethyst. This deck is the epitome of turn cards sideways, and some people are just going to love it. Daisy Duck, Hoda, the library are kind of the standouts, but let's not forget about Amethyst Chromacon and Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom. These are very new staples to the metagame. I think all of these cards have a potential to truly be that powerful. Coda is likely the only one that I'm questioning. The 2/1 stat line is fine on a 2 lore that's inkable. It's very hard to replace that. It's very similar to what we would consider to be a Mr. Smee in some ways, but obviously much weaker and can't be used to challenge much at all either. But this concept of the worry of Coda would really be, man, my Coda is very vulnerable to if Ruby Amethyst moves to 1/3s or if other decks moves to 1/3s, you know, like Amber Emerald might just play Flynn Rider in their deck as an option as a 1/3 Flynn Rider because it can trade with cards like Coda if you're going to be making those choices. Obviously Lilo as well and Pinocchio. And this deck isn't really having a great time of protecting it very well either. So the 2/1 stat line, I think it's fine. You can see here it's only a 2. We're not fully committed to it. But I do think that that's a card that we might see come out of this deck if it turns out that it's not powerful enough. The library, phenomenal. Amethyst Chromacon, phenomenal. Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom as a 3 of and 4 goats as a way to gain lore outside of the norm. Obviously, blue fits in that well. I understand the uninkable count is very high here. I would really consider trying to fit the 4th Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom. The idea that you can just have 4 cards in your deck that just say gain 2 lore really means that you only have to get to 12, 13, or 14 lore with the ability to just say, okay, I can now win the game with GOAT and with my bounce package and, you know, with Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom, specifically in a world where Amethyst Chromacon is allowing us to draw 2 cards a turn very often. The library is kind of offering a way to replace things. So I think there's a lot that could be going on with this deck, but it's definitely something we didn't talk about last week. So I wanted to make sure we got into the meta report this week. Really, really well played here by Zachary Powers and finishing in the top 8 of the 8 a.m. constructed event. Okay, so that was the 8 a.m. breakdown. Now this is the 9 a.m. breakdown. You can see it's pretty close to the same. It's a massive amount of decks on that list there. It's very powerful. It's very cool. There is a big shift. Ruby Sapphire took a huge shift in the 9 a.m. compared to the 8 a.m. So that's somewhat notable. But all in all, there's a lot of really interesting facts here. Like Amber Steel, very clearly a deck that people believe in set 5. You know, there's 45 of them registered in the first one. There's about 35 of them registered in this one. Ruby Sapphire gets uptick. Ruby Amethyst drops down a little bit. And then you kind of just see it all kind of spread out there, which I think is very, very interesting as you're seeing this much potential so very early on in a room that basically had over 300 players spread out between 2 tournaments. So you are telling the tale of 2 events, but they're all in the same room, 300 players, kind of all playing side by side, right next to each other, and the tournament's looking very, very similar. However, the finals and things of this event are a bit different. They played out quite a bit differently, so we're going to take a look at those lists as well. But I really think it's a very interesting breakdown, and after we talk about the next set of deck lists, we're actually going to look at all of the deck lists registered and kind of just see a full scope of what this really looks like. Spoilers, Amber Steel is towering. I mean it's towering over everything, guys. But nonetheless, let's take a look at some of the more successful decks in the 9 a.m. constructed tournament. So first and foremost, shout out to Attack for 2, which is my teammate, Dave Solberg. He took 2nd place in this tournament. And, you know, we talked about this last week at a deck that was very successful in a tournament for Shimmering Skies. Guys, if you're paying attention and you're looking at the deck list and the screen right now, yep. Yeah, no, you're not missing anything. There are 0 new Shimmering Skies cards in this list. In fact, if you look at this list for a moment, you might go, is it Into the Inklands metagame? Aside from of course, the one random Sisu here. But yeah, it is one of those where, you know, this is a deck that we were kind of playing for a little bit Into the Inklands, having the Rafikis, you know, of course, the Minnie Mouses, the Olafs, the Pinocchio. These are just cards that we didn't really see at all, you know, come out and play into the 4.5 metagame, but in all honesty, the Shimmering Skies metagame in general. So these are making a return, which is notable. These are cards that are very specific choices for this deck, and understanding that, hey, I need certain cards to go my way. I need Crab. I need my 1/3s to survive against steel decks. I need my Rafiki as a way to answer Daisy Ducks and things like that. So there's a lot to be noted here, and this deck played very, very well, finishing in 2nd place. Huge shout out to Dave. It's a deck that he loves and enjoys. He's played Ruby Amethyst pretty much his entire life of Disney Lorcana. It's cards he's never taken out of sleeve. So him being successful in this first side event that he's playing with these cards, really just taking an understanding of what the metagame was and what it was shifting into, and saying, hey, Ruby Amethyst doesn't need new tools to be successful. Another shout out to TFM. We took 2 spots in the top 8. Rob Serpay finished in 6th place, featuring a non-Lucky Dime version of Sapphire Steel mid-range here. Captain Hook, Tipo, Mr. Smee are the ways to kind of just combat early pressure through Daisy Duck. Fire the Cannons is another way to just put a little extra damage on. So on turn 2, if we have to, all we have to do is run our Captain Hook and fire the cannons to finish things off. Tipo, kind of giving you a way to really scale up the game and get really aggressive cards in play early. And even, honestly, ways to protect yourself if you want to be the aggressor in the game. Getting a Chempo out early can really help you go a long way. Also, just getting rid of extra uninkables that we don't need is really great for Tipo because it's a body. Putting Tipo into play on turn 2 still gives you a body, specifically when you're playing cards like Fire the Cannons that can finish things off, grab your sword, of course, and then along came Zeus. These are all ways that we can kind of like combat with things that were a problem in the past. Turn 2 Tipo puts a character in play that can gain lore, it can challenge, it can do all those things, but it also gives us the ability to play cards like Along Came Zeus on 4 if we need to against problematic cards. It also increases that timeline of Hiram. You know, a turn 1 Popsicle or Fortispear into a turn 2 Tipo, into turn 3 Hiram means we're replacing ourselves very early, we're drawing cards, and we're really figuring out the pace of play from that point forward. All in all, this is a deck that Rob has been in love with basically since Shimmering Skies release. He did play a version of this in Dallas. It didn't go very well for him, but it's just another proof that, hey, we don't all need to be giant crab, lucky dime decks. There are other ways to protect and win the game, and Ducks Matters a pretty damn good card with a lot of willpower and 2 passive lore a turn. And when you look at this deck and say, oh, I can defend it so very well, then you can really get to understand that if you want to try and leverage a little bit different style of Sapphire Steel, then I think this is a great way for you to try and do that. So here is a full breakdown of the side events for Saturday and Sunday at the DLC. You can see there was 80 registered Amber Steels, about 35 Amethyst Ruby, 35 Ruby Sapphires, and then Amber Amethyst, Amethyst Emerald, kind of lingering around the 20 to 30 spot. Amber Ruby, Amethyst Steel, Sapphire Steel, Amethyst Sapphire, and Amber Emerald kind of all hovering around the 15 registered spots. Emerald Steel just above 10. And then Emerald Ruby, Emerald Sapphire, Amber Sapphire, and Ruby Steel all coming into like the 0 to 5 range. So lots of versatility, 15 different registered decks, I believe, which is just great. It's a really good start to the Shimmering Skies metagame. It's definitely something to really be excited for, because at the end of the day, there's so much to explore in Shimmering Skies. Now, the first time, these types of numbers were being played in events, it was really nice to get what the meta looked like. So it's not like, hey, you're just getting the top 8 decks and you're seeing what they look like, because that is nice. It's good to see what is successful, but it's also good to understand what the player base was thinking early on. It's great to get that information to say, hey, okay, in a 170 player tournament, Amber Steel was the most played deck. In a 140 player tournament, Amber Steel was the most played deck. And I know I didn't actually show any of the Amber Steel decks because I did focus them last week. And honestly, they're pretty. Listen, guys, you get Daisy Duck, you get Prince Naveen, you get Pete Referee, maybe some other little things. But in all honesty, guys, it's a pretty straightforward transition from Amber Steel of set 4 to Amber Steel of set 5. But in all honesty, it's just an understanding like, hey, this deck, very successful in Shimmering Skies. Took a second place finish in the DLC. Shout out to David Nunes and him crushing it. If you're looking for that full interview that came out yesterday on the channel, you can check that. It'll be in the description below as well. Kind of hear what we think Amber Steel from set 4 to set 5 is going to do and the changes from it as well. We do think it's going to be very well positioned, because at the end of the day, A Whole New World's a really dumb card. And I mean dumb as in broken, and it lets you do really broken things. And it also takes away the main core negative of Daisy Duck, which is like giving your opponent cards. You don't care that you're giving your opponent's cards when you can just sing A Whole New World and remove it. So it's really not shocking that Amber Steel is the most played deck so far in the early on metagame here. And you can kind of see everything else trying to catch up and really find its home. I think our deck list from Saturday to Sunday, for the players that went and played Amber Steel on Saturday, then played it on Sunday, was just an 8-card difference. It was a very easy cut, and it was really thoughtless. I do think that there will be more thought that goes into it as the meta kind of like presents itself, but right now I think it's just thoughtless, and you can see that a lot of people felt that way. 80 of them registered through 2 events. It's a lot of information for you to process and going, okay, Amber Steel will be represented in these events moving forward, so I need to understand that if I'm not the Amber Steel player, or even if I am, I have to know that I have to expect it. I have to plan for it. I have to know my game plan for it. And that's the biggest takeaway, is that right now they're playing Amber Steel. So you need to be ready for that and be prepared for it and all of those fun things. All in all, really great events, really fast. The 8 a.m. was done by 3:30 p.m. And I believe the 9 a.m. was done by 4:30 p.m. So like right in sync together. 8-round tournaments. There was no cut to top 8. So all we're looking at is the data of the players that were. I do have some of the links below. So there'll be a Dreamborn link to PPG event management that was for the Sunday top 8 decks. And then I will have the Ink decks links also in the description below, which is showcasing whatever decks they could find the information for, because not all the decks were released by PPG for the top 8 competitors. So all I have here is the breakdown of the tournament, and this was the overall breakdowns from both Saturday or Sunday events of the 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. We're looking at about 310 deck lists here, give or take 1 or 2, of course. So this is what you can expect. This is what you should be looking for. And as you're building these decks, and we're kind of planning, next week we're going to give a shout out here to our friends over at the Lure 20 Pro on Twitch. They're going to be streaming a CCS 10K next week. So this is going to be the first streamed event for Shimmering Skies that we really know of, and we're going to take a look at. CCS has been hosting these events every 3 months. Huge shout out to them. They're normally large tournaments between like 100 to 250. I think they might have capped around 240 at their biggest event so far. I do think they're already 150 plus registered players for this event. So if you're looking to see Shimmering Skies on display, this is where you can find it, the Lure 20 Pro on Twitch. I believe that they're going to be streaming the entire tournament. So definitely go check this tournament out, because I'm sure it's going to have a lot of information that we're going to be really excited for. All in all, thank you guys so much With that, thank you so much for watching our video today. If you like videos like this, we do the meta report every single week. More often than not, I actually also post things in the Discord to our Patreon so they can see this information before everyone else. So if you're trying to get a little bit of a sneak peek, a little bit faster than everyone else, then joining the Patreon is the way to do it. You can also have the opportunity to talk to me and the team a little more upfront. But the Discord, great place, great community to hit it. And, you know, we told a whole story of the DLC Toronto through our Instagram page. So if you're really looking to find things and really like be up to date on our travel within Disney Lorcana, the Instagram is the way to go. So definitely check it out. All of the links will be in the description below, of course. Thank you guys so much. DLC Toronto was an absolute blast. I didn't do as well as I wanted to, but, you know, at the end of the day, every tournament is a new tournament. So we're going to move past it, take our 30 points, take our Rapunzel, go home, and look for a better day in Vegas. I can officially say that I am in all 6 Disney Lorcana challenges. I will be in Vegas. I will be in Seattle. I'm very excited. Also, spoilers, TFM Kylie, also going to be in Seattle. 33 points, guys, playing Emerald Ruby. She was ecstatic, picked up her Rapunzel. Huge shout out to her. Huge shout out to my teammate, David Nunez, 2nd place finalist in the DLC Toronto. It was such a pleasure to sit and watch him play. Honestly, remarkable through an entire day 2 of top 64. Huge shout out to him, picking up the Golden Mickey, picking up his invite to Continentals in Disneyland, which we talk about all in our interview. So if you're really looking forward and want to hear from his point of view, his story, his Cinderella story in Disney Lorcana, then you should check out this video right here. Thank you guys so much for watching today. Make sure you hit like, subscribe if you're not, and of course, as always, thank you so much, and we'll catch you in the next video.